podcast and a guest who really can be described as unique. There is no one alive who watches more football and bets on more football than Harry Findlay. Harry may be instantly recognisable for his co-ownership of Denman, who twice won the Hennessy and whose 2008 Gold Cup victory at Cheltenham is legend amongst its pantheon of races. And he's famed in Ireland for owning Big Fella Thanks, one of that country's foremost champion coursing dogs.
But Harry knows his football inside and out. When there was hardly any sport being played in the world during the first COVID lockdown, Harry managed to find coverage of trotting from Sweden and football from Belarus. He needed something to back because that's his life. I was fortunate enough to write the book of Harry's story called Gambling for Life, a title that really does sum up this extraordinary character. It was published in 2018, and I'm pleased to say it's still getting 5-star reviews. Welcome to the podcast, Harry. How are things with your life at the moment?
Yeah, great, Neil. Great. I was just thinking about the Belarusian football. Yeah, I mean, it was the only league that was on when the real COVID, that 3 months, and when there was nothing. And every game you get on the Betfair website and you betting, every single match is free to view, and they staggered the times, and it was fantastic. Yeah, and really enjoyed it, and the trotting. But I'm greyhound racing again, Neil, as you know, at the end of the book. Coventry was a disaster for me, and I made the mistake of leasing it and not buying it. Well, we've thanks to the support of the UK Tote, which I think is going to be a betting revolution and change people's lives, and low margins. The new CEO's a legend. Thanks to their support, we've bought a track in Ireland, and we're going to open in March. It's going to be a 10% takeout tote, which basically means every tenner that the people in the restaurant, people go to the dogs and bet with the tote, invest is worth £9 instead of 7. And it's replicating what the chairman's already done for the UK tote horse racing in England. And it's really exciting. It's great for the punters, and it gives me a chance to put right what was wrong at the end of our book. And so that's good news. And I'm looking forward to talking to you, lads, because to be fair, the book was warts and all. It was written around the racing and Denman and the bad times, and a lot of the good times were football for me, and the young times. And I think football was very much under not mentioned enough in the book. And I'm really looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, you should have had a better ghostwriter, Harry. It would have probably been done better then.
Oh no, Neil's. I can't thank Neil enough, because I had to be really talked into it. I wasn't in a great space at the time, and I thought they were mad. And in the mornings, I'd be sat and thinking, who wants to read my story? I was in the gutter, and I had nowhere to go. And not fortunately, but my mum was gravely ill at the time, so I had to go and see her once a week, which I wanted to. Kay was adamant, go and spend as much time as you can with your mum. And beautiful times, and luckily Neil was on the path on the train. Neil lives in Reading. I've known Neil all my life anyway, and my mum's in Wickham, near Maidenhead. So I do every week. We come up and do the route and take a couple of hours. I can't remember a lot of it, to be honest, but Neil did, and he had the tape recorder on. And Neil was I don't patronise anyone, but he was a hero of mine as a kid in tennis, and for writing that book, he's done it again. I remember taking Neil to the rock pool it was an honour to take Neil out for dinner. I took him out for lunch when he was in his pump, and I'd said, this is it tonight. Andy Murray's going to win the Australian Open deal. And I spent the whole meal telling him how Andy Murray was a certainty. And then he went and got 3 sets to 1. But no. So football's my real passion of mine.
Yeah, the book has sold very well, Harry. Does that show, obviously, an interest in the gambling, obviously an interest in your life? Do you think a lot of people do empathise with what you went through? Maybe some of them are going through, have got similar narratives to tell.
I think all gamblers. I think I'm a gambler. I've only ever considered myself as a gambler. I've only ever wanted to be a gambler because if you love gambling, you love gambling so much, and even more now as you get older in life, you all like the same things. And I always said as a kid, if you have one better day, whether it wins or loses, how it affects your mood. Well, when you're 60, it affects your mood even more, and it's even more of a buzz when it wins, and it's probably a bit more depressing when it loses. And all gamblers, it's about anything that's great in life. It's about controlling it, and I think that I go as close to the edge and as close to the wind as anyone can that needs to survive. And for me, it needs to mean something. And if that means spending more than I should spend, and Tony Bloom once said to me, we never put it in the book, but Tony Bloom once said to me, when I was going to we were divvying up or whatever, and he said, if spending money in philanthropy was handicapped on how much money you actually have, and it was handicapped, like relative to how much money you've actually got, he said, you would absolutely shitting in both. And in on reflection, I think it's a good compliment from Lizard, and he's right. And I think that outlook on life, and me being around Lizard for a few years, without being funny, I think it was a big influence on Tony Bloom, and I'm sure he appreciates that. Tony Bloom would learn off. Tony Bloom's the best sponge you'll ever meet. He listens to everything. Just because he's got his bundles, he listens to everything. And someone said to me, my eldest daughter Jay, she lives in America now. And when she was very young, she spent a lot of time in Sheffield with Kay's mum, working class, and obviously we were going a bit better, and we'd mixed the two. And Tony Bloom used to learn off my daughter. He'd listen to her and he'd take things in, incredible. And he's a very good listener.
I think we should let people know, of course, that Tony Bloom is the owner of Brighton and Hove Albion. And I remember you saying about 3 or 4 years ago, Harry, that even when they were struggling, there's no way that a club run by Tony Bloom will be relegated. There's no way. Why did you feel that? What is it that he's got that is so special, do you think?
Oh, well, they were ahead of the game. I mean, you see Moneyball, they were ahead of the game. And that's Moneyball in its purest form would be more Benhamish. And he's been massive.
Matthew Benham at Brentford.
From thing, yeah. With being football, you guys are so well known in football, and that's what we're talking about. But yeah, the chairman, they both run the football clubs. But I mean, they're both child of. I mean, Lizard was a fanatic footballer. I used to go and watch at the same time. I lived in Brighton, and he was just a little fan of football. And for him to have the club and do what they've done, and all the whole structure, the whole thing, and then for Benham to do the same thing, and basically, through football punting and how they're ahead of the market in terms of, how people should be betting on football. And I mean, actually, we still in Britain bet the Ladbrokes, Corals, Hills 3 football teams, which is 114%, and punters are still doing it now. And after I finished working with Tony and after we'd split up and everything, I remember Matthew Benham offering me a big sum to work with him and explain the Asian handicap. And I wasn't going to call it Asian handicap. I was going to call it just handicap. And the three of us independently, none of us, Bloom, Benham and myself, none of us can understand why why British punters didn't embrace the fact that you can bet on football with only 2 runners. You know what I mean, John? Instead of 3. So instead of betting Arsenal, Man United, or the draw, which we do in England, we just bet Arsenal and Man United draw no bet. And it means that a punter is effectively betting red or black with only 1 green. And instead of that, they're playing red or black with like 5 greens. They don't need to. And it's still now, even Matthew and I would have had that chat 10 years ago. And here we are now, still in the same situation when punters in England are listening to Ray Winston and next goal scorer and Jeff Stelling telling you to have legs and all that. Sky better Sky, and all those accumulators build a bet. Every single leg you build, guys, the bets gets worse value, and that's why everyone should bet around the low margins. The 2 runners, low margins. American football, rugby league. Why not soccer? It's not impossible. If Arsenal are 3 to win 1 against Sheffield United, then the handicap price is 1.5 goals. They are the win. But for some reason, I think the word Asian's got something to do with it. We're all perplexed why it hasn't happened, but it is mainly because the big firms of course, love the big margin, love the 3 runners. And I mean, the ACCAs now, I used to bet ACCAs when I was a kid, and there'd be bits of value now, but now it's so tight, and all the skinny ones are so easy to price up, and Betfair, it's just impossible. And punters, all those football punters out there, all you young football punters, there's so many of you. Please understand, bet around low margin, bet around 2 runners. better, you have to bet around that. You can't be having accumulators. You can't. And no matter, you just got to stick to the simple singles and don't, build a bet my arse. You're taking 200 to 1 about a 700 to 1 chance. When if you're betting 2 runners, 3%, it's the same as red or black in a casino. But it's better than red or black because you've got Arsenal or Man United and you've got a preference. Someone's not playing. And people, because I used to bet big or betting small is easier to win. Youngsters should be working together and betting on handicaps and getting a few quid. Do the lower divisions. It's never been better for young punters. And don't listen to Ray Winston and don't listen to Jeff Stelling. And get yourself a Betfair account. And Betfair have listened to me, Neil. When we wrote the book, I said about Betfair, everyone should be on 2% and it's a disgrace and all that. They've changed it. It's not openly changed, but if you go on, everyone can now pay 2%. So if the taxi driver puts a tenner in Betfair, he pays 2%. The same as me, the same as Benham, the same as Lizard. We all pay the same. And that's how it should be. Now, that's what's about. Anyway, any punters have got to get on Betfair and they've got to, you can go to an option on Betfair where you only pay 2 pence commission. And that's the most important thing. You pay 4 or 5p commission, you can't win. So there's low margin on Betfair. And there's low margin on the Asian handicaps. So you have to play all your football bets on the Asian handicap. And now it's even better because we've now got a UK toe horse racing that bets on average to 6% per horse, which is like going back to the 50s. And hardly anyone's realised it. No one's opening accounts with the toe. And the toe are already partners with the Hong Kong Jockey Club. They show the Hong Kong racing and they give Hong Kong prices plus 10%. So if youngsters know where the low margins are, they've really got a chance. And they've got to go away from these accumulators, dream bets and all this and lottery stuff. Just have your one football bet a week. There's guys who make living on the National League. They're shit on. If I get told to bet on the National League, I might get the maximum bet I'll get is 300. And that's a lovely bet. 300 at 4 to 6 Basingstoke or something. And this other team's got 4 or 5 players out. Lovely. What do you want to have a £100 accumulator for when you can do your own work on the lower leagues? Don't forget the people who are pricing up these lower leagues don't know as much about football as they're not got loads of teams, they're not got all the algorithms, the expected goals and everything. I mean, nowhere to go, you can win on football. Football is one of the easiest ways to win on. I've done it all my life. All that talk about owning horses and all that. Look, Ben does the horses. No one wins at the dogs. You can't get on. Every penny I've got from football, or had and spent and loved. You know what I mean? It's all football. Even now, if someone said to me now, "What do I bet on?" I'd still say football. But no one's telling people the right way to do it. But let me tell you, the way Lizard did it and the way Benham did it, you can do it yourselves. It's only amalgamated opinion. It's only people pitching in the same pot.
Talking generally, Harry, I mean, football's in a quandary at the moment, isn't it? You mentioned all the adverts, Ray Winston, etc., etc. I mean, half time on a game, Sky game, every advert is virtually a betting advert. So that's sucking probably young people into it. At the same time, it's become like a disease for some people. There's a worry about it. Yet football, more than half the Premier League, the shirt sponsors are aligned to betting companies. So the money comes in, but there is a problem nationwide, like alcoholism, betting can be a disease as well. So I can see both sides of this, but obviously you're a gambler. It's been a roller coaster for you, but you can obviously see the dangers for youngsters being sucked into it.
Oh, massively. And you must understand that, I know, I mean, when the book came out and we had the top journalists come out and we got some lovely lunches. I was skint at the time and I didn't mind. I knocked a few polyfusays back over those lunches. Tonight it was lovely. I was any more. And I think they were looking for the betting element as well about the bookmaking side of it. And that's the difference between what Brentford and Brighton, Tony and Matthew have done. They actually are punters. And I wish, if anything, that they could have found a way to explain how they are punters, now they do bet. Well, to be fair, Benham tried and was going to use me as a front man because we believe that football betting doesn't need to be dangerous. It doesn't need to be accumulators and next goal scorer and everyone loses and all that lot. We believe, there's so much money spent on it now. Like you say, all companies, there's a different company every day betting on football, but no one's doing it different. Whereas, I'm not being funny. I hate to say it, but dishwashers in Thailand and everyone in Thailand, hotel workers, they're getting great value. They're finishing their shift and having 400 baht, 40 quid, and they're getting 40 to win 39, draw no bet. And silly buggers in England are having £40 trebles and all that, and ringing up and getting builder bet. And someone works out the odds 700 to 1 and lays you half of that. No, that's the biggest problem.
I'm talking generally though. I'm talking about it's so easy now. You don't have to go to the bookies, do you? It's on your phone. There's a temptation. I mean, yourself, Harry. There's a temptation for somebody to put on money they can't afford because it's so easy to do it, and it is aimed at the youngsters. You can see those people in the adverts. They're like in their early 20s, if you like. There is a worry that people are getting sucked into that.
Listen, mate, I agree 100%, and I've told Neil there's nothing. When I first bet on football, and I bet on football before anyone else, I think, really, with Tommy, and I was mad for football betting because I loved it as a kid. I loved football. I was crazy about football. Then I got crazy about betting. So the two together was heaven for me. So I'd go in pubs and watch football, and no one had ever bet on football. And now it's just everywhere. And they're all doing it wrong. I just don't. And to say it's a problem, it's a massive problem, and it's not going away. I mean, every the more countries I watch, Brazil and Argentinian football at the weekends. Kay's a full-time carer at the moment, so I'm watching more football, South American football, and it's all their shirts now as well. And I do think it's a massive problem, especially the ignorance around it. But I sort of think it's going to change, John. I sort of think that people are going to be more educated about betting. There's a new breed of youngsters, a bit like the politics. All the last 20 years, everyone's kids have been droned about leftism, and they've all fallen for the trap, and they've all been indoctrinated. And I think there's a younger generation that are going, hold on a minute, and I think betting is the same. I think there's a newer generation who are a bit cleverer now coming through, who know the difference between 114 and 103. And I think podcasts like this, because there's a lot of shrewd gamblers that will go on and talk about things and teach punters. I mean, I did a podcast with Matchbook and mentioned about the 11 men against 10. And I've had, since I've done that, I've had about 20 people come up to me and say, Harry, thanks for that advice. Just the same as the professor told me. It saved me he saved me fortunes, and it does. And, and the more advice you get, the more and people are listening to interviewing gamblers, and people are picking up different things, and they can say, I like what he says and I like what he says. A lot of, as I said earlier, piss in the same pot. A lot of gamblers. My best friend as a kid, Ray Swain, was the best judge of a point-to-point horse, as good a judge of horses as I knew at that time in my life. But he never won, because when he picked a horse out on the Tuesday and come on the Saturday, everyone else fancied it, and so-and-so fancied it as well. For some reason, that half got, he didn't like that. He wanted to be on his own and all that, and that's the way to the poorhouse. And that is the way to the poorhouse. Work in a team. If I was 16, 17 now, I'd have got a uni and all that, all this stuff. But I'd be in any environment. I'd be saying, let's have an opinion. Let's do a lower league. Let's see if we can win. It's anything at all. College American football, because if you study it, it's 10 to 11, and you get 100% every game, John. There's no need to have accumulators. If you want to bet on a college American football game on a Saturday, with all the firms there are now, like you said, there's so many firms. We've all said there's so many firms. Take advantage of it. Go on the internet. There's 30 firms. So if you're betting on American college football on a Saturday, you can find out who's got the most injuries. Be the first one to find out the team news. Bet the other team on the handicap, the best price any of the 30 bookmakers, for your $30. Do it for the rest of the season. And if you lose at the end of the season, come back to me and I'll pay you your losses, because you won't lose. You'll win.
It's interesting, Harry, because you obviously, you love the way that Tony Bloom and Matthew Benham go about their business. And on the other side of the argument, there's the Coates family, the Bet365 family, who own Stoke City. I mean, I think Denise Coates is probably, isn't she the richest woman in Britain? And you could argue that's just not right. It shouldn't be right.
Yeah, well, they're very professional what they've done. Bet365, but they are out and out bookmakers. They are, to me, they're so polished. I mean, as a businesswoman, what she's done is fantastic. But the higher mark, their service. I mean, if you want to have a bet on a dog or a horse or anything, their service is so good, and it's also plush. But and to be one thing, to be fair to them, they do bet on every sport, and they cover everything. And it is, if you were going to invent a service to get people punting and to do their dough, they've done it to perfection. But like I say, I do think times are changing. I do think, with this new tote being a revolution, all the money, there's no Denise Coates at the tote. It goes back into racing, back into football. The chairman of the tote, we get paid thousands of what she gets paid. And the money goes back into racing, and the money stays in the pool. And it's a different type. And the same with the low margin stuff, as I'm explaining with the college football or anything. The same goes for lower leagues, all the national football leagues. They bet on Southern Premier League and all this now. I get and I think it's fantastic, because people need to try and win, not gamble. It's not about the gambling. It's not about paying for the buzz. If you buy a lottery ticket for £2, it's worth £1. So even if you win, you just got pot lucky. And there's no, it's not about that. It's about wanting to win. I'm not, the way JP McManus bets, I'm not his biggest fan. But the way he talks about gambling, in one article, he said, it's not about the gambling, it's about winning. And that doesn't have to be £1 million. You don't have to win 2 million, win 15 quid. You get commentators say at the racing, don't bet 30 to win 20. You got to have 6,000 to win 4, or 600 to win. Why can't you have £15 to win 10? It might be Basingstoke who are playing a team with 6 players out. What's wrong with a geezer coming out of the work and going, oh my God, I know they've got 4 players out. Go on that machine, I'll get 60 quid on. It's the best bet you'll ever have. And you've got people in the press telling them 6 to 4 on is for people having 60 grand on. What? It's wrong. But they're going to have less influence, because there's not just one person talking about betting now. There's going to be me doing a podcast, and there's other people. You pick things up from other gamblers. There's things, I get people send me little things on the phone, and they say, listen to this, and I go, yeah, he's right. Because you do. You got, it's an armoury. It's us against them. And I think that betting, although it's a problem now in football, I think that there will be, more people will start seeing football as a betting product and not as a bookmaker and everyone loses thing. And I think it will get better. But at the moment, I still think it's a major problem. I don't want to be, it's easy to dig out Bet365 and firms like that, but and I do, because mainly in terms of the fact that punters should have the ability to. The number one thing about anyone who wants to have a bet on football or anything else is to bet to the lowest margins. It's just like buying potatoes. If you had, or buying anything, you're not going to pay 3 times the price, and that's what you're doing sometimes when you're playing the 1, 2, 3 draw, win on the football. You're paying 115 quid when you can pay 4 times more, and that you wouldn't pay 4 times more for a bag of chips. Anyway, we're here to talk about football, not just betting. We're here to talk about Diego Maradona and things like that.
Tell us about Diego Maradona then.
Oh no, I mean, I got hooked on travelling when I was young, as you know. We nearly had a chapter on Barcelona in the book. I went there when I was 16, and Napoli had a dog track. It was the most scariest place on the planet, really. But it was so. They used to bet on dogs to finish second in Italy. There was a track in Rome and a track in Naples, and it was so tricky. That's what half the bookmakers bet to win the race, and half of them bet to finish second. That's how tricky it was. But it was so intimidating, so scary. But the lads who went to the dog track were top lads at the football, and I remember taking Kay there years later, and we had the best time of our lives. So I saw Diego Maradona at close quarters, and I remember speaking to Alex Ferguson, your man, the legend that's Alex Ferguson. And to this day, I still think people underestimate how much Alex Ferguson, when you go all in there, in the old days, when you go absolutely all in, like Phil Taylor or the Rabbit Hose or whatever, Alex Ferguson did that with Wayne Rooney when he bought Wayne Rooney. They wanted millions they wanted the Glazers and loads of money on the firm then. and he just bought a centre forward for a fortune. It turned out to be no good. And I think Man United buying Wayne Rooney and the Steve Gerrard guys in Liverpool making sure he didn't go to Chelsea at the time when Roman Abramovich was spending bundles and that. I thought that was a really important moment for the Premier League and stabilising fact of football. Anyway, I had a chat with Fergie about this, and of course he was all favour for that. But when it comes to the best footballer in the world, he won't have anyone else other than Pele. And when you try and argue with him, he'll say, well, 1958, did you watch every match? I watched every match, you didn't. You know, Pele is the greatest. But I think, you're a bit older than me, so you'd be better judges than me. Definitely better judges than me, according to Alex Ferguson. And I just think that Maradona, if you allow all the factors and you allow for how the other players went after him, I mean, it's hard for people. I'm lucky because I'm probably the same generation as you talked about Maradona and Naples. I mean, it was unbelievable, Neil, wasn't it? I mean, Messi, I love Messi. I saw him play his second ever game for Barca. But Messi would have been, he wouldn't have got 2 games a season when Maradona was playing. And no disrespect to Pele, that's what I think. I think Pele would. And then Ferguson says, well, did you not watch 58 and 62? Pele got kicked to death. They kicked him to death. And all right, but surely Diego Maradona is the greatest footballer that ever played the game by a furlong. And I can't have, I just don't see it as a contest. I remember waking my old girlfriend Carol up when they were playing Belgium in the middle of the night and saying, she was a supervisor at Marks and Spencer's getting up at 7, but I said, no, you have to watch this. You will never, ever see that. If that's the greatest performance by a footballer ever. Greatest performance by a footballer ever.
Does George Best come into the
just before my time. I was a Chelsea fan, and as Neil knew, I used to go and watch Wycombe Wanderers all the time. Wycombe Wanderers and Chelsea. Anyway, they one of them would be a cup day. It would have been the third round of the FA Cup, and one of them went on. Chelsea, but I think both games there was none of them were playing. So Neil Bowler was a Spurs fan. So I thought I'll get up on the train, I'll go and watch Spurs playing Aston Villa in the cup. And Glenn Hoddle played that day. And it's the greatest performance by. Anyway, it was the most one-man performance I've ever seen because I never had a bet. In those days, there was no betting. I was Chelsea mad, didn't like Spurs, didn't like Villa, didn't care about Villa or Spurs. I watched the game, the only game I've probably watched in my life, where I was completely, nonplussed about who won. And I thought Glenn Hoddle put in the most comprehensive performance. Anyway, young Tom, he used to be friends with Glenn's sister, and last year we bumped into him in a pub. And I told him this. I said, remember that game? You must remember it. Best game you ever played, la-da-da-da-da. And he sort of remembered it and thought about it. Bang, bang, bang. I thought, that surprises me. Anyway, an hour later, the text come through to Tom. Tell him he's right. Bang. Best performance. Anyway, I told him in the pub as well. I said how great he was. But anyway, they played Denmark about a week later. So I'm in the pub. I said to my mates, I said, listen, you've got to come and watch this game. I said, you can't believe it. We'll bet England 2. Glenn Hoddle was playing. It was one of his first games. I said, you've got to bet this. We've got to bet 3-0. England was 7 on. Can you imagine? There was 7 on playing Denmark. And in those days, 7 on then is completely different now. 7 on then is like 14 on now. And that's what price England were to beat Denmark. So I've got all my mates. We've gone 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, 6-0. England, Denmark. It was 1-0. It was the luckiest 1-0 win. And I swear, Glenn Hoddle never touched the ball. He never touched the ball. And that's how football can be different. But that is the most, that Glenn Hoddle performance in the third round of the Cup against Villa was my best ever individual player in England. And anyone who doesn't think Messi against Belgium in that quarter-final is mad. And what was even worse, the worst comment ever was Barry Davies. No disrespect to him, I'm sure it was Barry Davies, but when everyone made Germany certain to beat Argentina in the World Cup final, right? And Messi got them there single-handedly. Not Messi, Maradona got them there single-handedly. Got Argentina in the final. Everyone hated them. Everyone loved the Germans. What do you love the Germans for, right? And they got no. Neil, it was terrible. They weren't even a better team, Germany. Germany was 7-4 on. Do you know what I did? I bet with Dudley 7-4 on the unders. I got a fortune in that World Cup. At the start of the World Cup, he was laying me under 2.5 evens, under 2.5, 10-11. In the final, he said to me, "Oh, you're not having me here," he said. "I'm 4-7 the unders." I said, 4-7? I said, how much can I have? 4-7 the unders. I swear there wasn't a shot. There wasn't a shot in the first 80 minutes. And they got a penalty with 7 minutes to go. Right? And Germany scored. And it wasn't a penalty. No way was it a penalty. But the Germans got it 1-0. 1-0. After the game, he's getting the silver medal, Maradona, crying his eyes out. I'm sorry if it wasn't him, and I'm sorry if it was someone else, and whoever it was, said, got what he deserved. Got what he deserved. Germany weren't even the better team, and that man got them to the final. What was it about Maradona? But I mean, as a footballer, I mean, not surpassable in any way, shape, or form. Sorry, Alex, I'm not having it. And I know these two boys agree with me, so that's 3 against 1 now. They did what 1958 probably. No, all 62. They might have done.
Harry, something I found absolutely staggering was the fact that you once lost 2.5 million gambling. I mean, I didn't even know you could put that much.
Oh, no, that was a World Cup. That was a World Cup. I cut it down to one.
Rugby union, yeah. But can you talk us through that? Because
I mean, we can, but everyone's heard it. But I lost 2.5, but I traded 600 grand back, which if I hadn't done it, I would have been a mug. Right. That would have killed me. But I lost the 1.9. But as Neil knows, 4 months later, I had 2.2 million on Federer.
Yeah, can you just explain to the people listening to this? How are you allowed to put that much on? Because one of them was New Zealand to win the Rugby Union World Cup. So there's a match to win the World Cup. If you want to back in the Football World Cup, Brazil to beat France or whatever, like when Brazil won, when Blue won the highest money he's ever won, and so did I. We both in the World Cup final. France were playing Brazil, and the bet was, like I'm saying, age and handicaps, evens each of two. Could have 10 million on Brazil to win the game, or 10 million on France in the draw. So Brazil win and is red, and black is France in the draw. And it was evens both. And me and Lizard both made France favourite, draw no bet. So it'll never ever happen again. And we went in again at half time, and we all got chunks, but he'd have got treble chunks as usual. But that's what we're talking about before that again. How are you allowed to put that? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yes, so what I'm saying is, win the World Cup, you can have what you like on. I mean, you literally in the World Cups, and one of those was a Wimbledon final. So to win Wimbledon over a period of time, I'd back New Zealand to win the World Cup for 18 months. I'd use it as a bank account. So you can't go and have 2 million on a horse. You can't go and have 2 million on Chelsea and beat Newcastle. But to win if you wanted to back England to win, Brazil to win the World Cup at 4-1, you could probably get 500,000 on no problem. But New Zealand, of course, was 7 to win, with 5 to win 4 anyway. So it was easy to get on. But punters have all heard that story, and then that's the only reason why. Because I was flying at the time, and I used it as a bank, and it got beat. But as to why I could get the size, it was purely because it was a World Cup to win a World Cup. That was the size. Yeah, but everything's relative. Everything's relative. I just find it absolutely staggering that you went to that game, didn't you, at the Millennium Stadium, the quarter final against New Zealand against France, and you're sitting there half time, New Zealand are leading, and then you get to the final whistle, you've lost, and 2.5 million's been.
Well, I lost 1.9, but I wasn't even. I was more bothered about the other people that I'd put. I was much more bothered about the other people that I told to bet it. People that had £1,000 on that probably couldn't afford it. I told a lot of people, a lot of cab drivers to have 5. So I was more worried about them. I was more worried about them on the train home when I was in a carriage full of, The whole thing was they should have played Argentina that night. If I'd have known they were going to play France, I wouldn't have bought the tickets. I wouldn't even have been there. I'd have been at home, and I'd have probably, bailed out a bit more. That's why it was so important that I bailed out at half time. But like I say, everything's relative. I made 4 months later, I made Roger Federer the biggest certainty in my life when he played Nadal in the final. Because Neil will tell you, and I had even more on Federer because Nadal, I think he had that war with Soderling in there, and it took 4 days to play one round. And Neil was the biggest tennis man to play. It was the most lopsided draw ever. The top half cruised through, and the bottom half had to play like 5 games in 5. It was completely perverse, wasn't it, Neil? Yeah. And I was sure that Nadal was injured, non-grass. Grass was a lot faster then than it is now. I made it 105 Federer, genuinely 106, and it was 122. And it went to a 5th set, and I had so much money on that I was literally dumping 60 grand a set. But it's relative to what you're staking, because I remember that day telling Tony Bloom it was the biggest certainty ever to walk on a tennis court, and he probably had more than I had on it, and he probably didn't even know the result till half 10 that night. So it's everyone. It's everyone's, some people, the money doesn't matter. I was laying out on scoop 6s sometimes 250 grand, and Tony Bloom had 30% of it and didn't even know till a week later. So
could you just give us a little insight into Tony, because I mean he's no one knows anything about him. He's very secret, very quiet, never gives interviews. Yet Brighton as a club is prospering. They've got one of the best young English coaches in the game, in Graham Potter. It's an incredible story, and it's all been down to him, and yet no one knows.
I think it's the greatest. I mean, we fell out over business and what happens with horses, but the respect's there, and I think it's the greatest story ever. Honestly, I do. Honestly, I mean, but you see it in the fans' faces, don't you? It's great. I mean, you just see it every man. I mean, he must. I know when he's got so much dough now, but he shares everything out. He has a star system. The cleaner gets. I've said in the book now, the cleaner gets a few quid. The way he sets it up, the way he set it up originally, like I think I had about or whatever. The way he set it up is so good, and like they're not bookmakers. There's neither of them. They are both punters. They're both money balls, and that's why. I mean, Ben was buying players, and someone told me recently that he's buying and selling the best on the planet. The best buying and selling of all time on stats. And yet, John, you know that when he sacked Warburton, everyone wanted to shoot him. And I think he nearly jacked it in. And I mean, what would have happened then? That would have been journalists and people screaming at him, fans screaming at him. And now look, I mean, when you get things wrong, you've got to be very careful. I mean, I'm a big loudmouth, but when I'm wrong, I put my hands up. And you've got to put your hands up when you get things wrong. And, when Warburton got the sack, he was the pits of the earth. But as we explained to the big journalists when my book came out, Neil, they are just punters, and they are. And I wish that it's a shame that they are so secretive because you could follow them. But there are people find out what they're doing. People know what they like and who they prefer because you hear it through the grapevine even now, and it's right. And people want to follow them, and rightly so. But it's the whole thing to turn it into your dreams into reality. Because I joked, as we in the book, we joked about it to start with that Tony would do it. That Tony would do it at Brighton. It was his. I think Tony would have wanted to do it at Brighton when he was there in the last game at the Goldstone ground and everything when it wasn't a ground. And I remember going to watch some games with him that Withdean Stadium when it was athletics. There's nothing worse than football. I remember the Munich Stadium when I went to the European. Oh no, and freezing cold down in Brighton. And now look at it when you see it now on the telly. And the fans, and now I think they're both absolutely the best thing that's happened to football. And as we said at the time, there's no way Brighton will go down. That was 4 years ago. So it's impossible for them to go down the next 4 or 5 years. And Brentford will go up, and I'll be very surprised if they don't have a long spell there. They've got a few injuries now. They get but it's going to be interesting to see what Newcastle spend next month.
That's a raw nerve with Rico there.
That's your department, Rico. You got a checkbook.
Well, I did spend 3 happy years on the Brighton Evening Argus. That was the Alan Mullery regime when they played in Goldstone. They're in the old third division, attracting crowds of more than 30,000. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. So I've got a soft spot for Brighton, and I really like Graham Potter. I think the biggest problem Brighton have got is to hold on to him. Because a lot of clubs are
I don't play on the spreads, John. I don't play on the spreads, but when I saw Lamptey, I've never seen a player as fast as Lamptey in my life. That game he played for Brighton, and the signings they made about 6-7 signings that the last season before last with COVID, and I never ever played the spreads, and I had a massive bet Brighton points. I bet Brighton to get more than 4.5 points over the season. And Lamptey got injured out for the rest of the season 2 games later. And they must have left about 20 points on the pitch. I ended up losing 1.5 points. And how they didn't make the points that year, well, you know yourself, they had so many good signings that year, Brighton. And if Lamptey had played all season and the ball had gone right, I'll be honest, I bet in top 10. I went for a right touch, top 10, and I bought them 44. I told all my mates to buy them. And I never ever do the spreads because there's so much margin for them. But if there is one time you can play the spreads where there's a bit more value, it is the total points for the season, and that's why I played it. But no, very unlucky that season. And you just know they're not. I've got a friend in Australia who's Brighton man, the best man at my wedding over there, and he wound me up today. He said, "Oh, Brighton are in trouble again," and he knows. It really is winding me up knowing that they were the better team against Pulis Saturday, probably first 60 minutes. I still,
What about the relegation odds? Are you going to give me any? Hope
well, that's it. Well, you'll know the odds. You tell me what you know, and I'll tell you what the odds are. But no,
I've got a hell of a battle on their hands, to be honest.
I don't know. It's so. I thought Man United. I can't have the Man United at any price syndrome. And what about last night? We were all on Man City last night, not match odds, but to win the group. And I mean, to me, PSG. You just how can you ever bet PSG? Honestly, 4 or 5 of the games they've won this year, it's just absolute counterfeit. And Michael Owen summed it up last night. You can't have 3 of them chasing back. I'm sitting there saying, no, you can't. Mercenaries. And that's why you know Pep Guardiola's the governor, right? Because if ever a team in England in the last 30 years were going to be proven to be a bit mercenary, a bit PSG, like it was going to be Man City. They had so many signings, so big money, the Qatari dough, Pep's already been to Barca, done it all there, done it all at Bayern, you know what I mean? Done it all at Bayern. And no, Pep's still got them. It's still in a different class. I mean, I like Liverpool as well, so don't get me wrong. I'll get in trouble with it. But they are. I've done my money on Man City big for the last 3 Champions Leagues. And he made them changes last year, and I'm still going over it. But I've only bet them tiny this year, but they are so good to watch. I mean, look at last night. Them 3 were out, and that could have been 5-6-1 last night.
Yeah.
I will tell you one thing about Tony, that he was the one all the football now is run by the expected goals now. You see, they do that expected goals where it tells you what according to the pattern of play on the algorithms, what the team should have scored. And that's what people use. Say a team wins 2-0, they look at the expected goals and it might say 1.5-1. Well, when we first started, the first year we started, I'm sat at home watching the Champions League. You can only watch 1 game or 2 games. 2 days after the Champions League finishes, I get a big box at the door. Harry Findlay untaped it. 16 tapes from all the Champions League matches. They're on beta tapes. So Tony, I said, I can't watch them all, Tony. He says, yeah, you can. He said, watch every one. He said, from now on, he said, only watch the live games. Try not to. If there's any games you don't know the score before, then try not to know the score, but watch every game and then write a report and say what the score should have been. And that is the start of that is effectively what it was. That was effectively how it started, and that was his way of doing it. He was like 20. He was like 15 years ahead, and he used me initially. I'll be the only one who watched the games, but he'd have other people and he'd get all the different opinions in. About it. But I was his benchmark on the Champions League because I was a Champions League fanatic all my life. And
well, thanks for explaining expected goals, because until then I didn't have a clue what it was. When it comes on match of the day, expected goals. What's all this about?
No, it's good. It's good because I didn't know exactly what it was, but I had a young kid here come to see me, and he explained it to me, and I said, "Well, that's what me and Lizard did. That's what Lizard does. That's expected goals. Effectively, it lets you know. It's a way of calculating, but we did it in the old-fashioned way." But that's what it is. It's what the expected goals. If you're in a rush and you ain't got time to read, I'd read all the papers of every match when I was betting football with Tony every Sunday. I'd read like you boys do. I'd read the reports of all the games and I'd listen to everything. But if you're in a hurry and you can't do it, and you see the scores and say they're the scores, they're the real scores. What's on the balance of play? What's the thing? That's what you want. The expected goals, because that's like 50 people watching the tapes that Tony Bloom sent me, all putting the scores down, sticking it in a machine and coming out with that score. And I remember the most famous one ever when they give me a bollocking, when it was the game was abandoned in Turin and they played the next day. And bit of a Larry story, but so what? We didn't put many Larry stories in the book. And Juventus won 4-0. Juventus won 4-0. And I'll watch the game. One Juventus, 3.5 by Leverkusen. Tony Bloom's got on the phone. 4-0 Juventus and 3-1 by Leverkusen. I said, yeah. I said, that's exactly right. Back to win the group, back to win the Champions League. 33-1 they were, 40-1. Champions League each way everywhere. They were better than Real Madrid in the final when Steve McManaman scored the winner and done us. But Bayer Leverkusen. So that's what expected goals is. A bit leery on my behalf, but I apologise for that. But Juventus won 4-1, and I scored it 3.5-1 to Bayer Leverkusen. I can't be exaggerating because otherwise you find out about it. But that was the biggest discrepancy I ever had working doing all the tapes in Champions League. When the team won 4-1, they actually got bad. But it does happen. Look at I bet Leipzig last night. It's tiny, but they on the form you couldn't back them, but they destroy teams. Like I'm a Red Bull man. I like Red Bull. I like Salzburg. I like Leipzig. I like Red Bull. Red Bull have got pros all around them. I don't like the drink, but I like Red Bull. I'm on Max Big, but we're in so much trouble. I'm paying out water because Mercedes have found a new engine from nowhere. You put in a new engine, but no one knew it had like what it's got. It's completely. I've gone mad for the Grand Prix this year because I think it's like I watched a film recently, The Last Duel, where they fight to the death, the last ever one in Paris. And I honestly think, hand on my heart in sport, I've always loved a buckle. Big fella, thanks, Troy Razor. Denman Courto Star was made for me. But I honestly think Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen is the biggest buckle ever. And I think, genuinely, if someone has said to me, you can have 25-1, that one of them died 6 races ago, I'd have been on. And I'm telling you, it's a war. Max keeps saying it doesn't matter if you don't win it. Yeah, all right, Max.
Harry, what do you make of the new appointments in the Premier League and of the ones like Gerrard to Villa and Dean Smith gone to Norwich, Conte to Tottenham, and whoever might take over Man United? Who of those do you think has the best chance of success?
I'm not. I don't talk about things I don't know about, and managers I find hard work. I just think that Steven Gerrard long term will be a success. I think Conte's obviously done it and been there and done it, but I'm not a Spurs man. No, I think I'd hate going back to it again. I'm going to go. I'll give me a few quid at the end of here. I agree with Graham Potter. I think Graham Potter, they would have put when they were going for Graham Potter. I think he was a massive thing, and apart from him, I wouldn't really have much of an opinion with the managers. But perhaps Gerrard, I think what he done at Rangers was more impressive than people think. And I don't know. I think Stevie Gerrard could have gone to Liverpool straight away, and obviously, I think it's probably although I think a lot of Liverpool fans might have had the Umpty appointment. I think it's a good way of finding out whether he's up. Whether he's up. I think in terms of if you're a Liverpool fan or Liverpool FC, I think you if he is special, you'll find out if you're.
Yeah, I agree with that. Very much so. Very much. But he's a very impressive. He cuts a very impressive figure, doesn't he?
Oh, everything about him. And like I say, it goes back to that thing. It goes back to his. I know a few lads and the top people up there. And I know that if he'd have gone to Chelsea, Steven Gerrard had gone to Chelsea, it would have made me physically sick as a football fan. And the fact that he didn't, and the fact that I'm gutted when he's sitting around, didn't win the league. I was on Liverpool then as well, but like you've summed it up, Neil. There's a cut about him. It's just, I'd like to play for. If I had any ability, I'd like to play for him. I'd like to play for him, yeah, for sure.
There was a sort of a murky background to that failed deal, wasn't there? Are you aware of that, Harry? That Gerrard not going to Chelsea. There was a few undercover moves, let's say.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be privy to that. The only undercover moves sort of I know about is the fact that they come to their senses and they're proper Liverpool. His family and it was round the table and this is what's right and what's wrong. And I'd like to think it was that to do with it. All I just know is that I just think, and look what's happened now with Liverpool. I think they were two crucial things for both clubs. I think Fergie going in with Rooney and Steven Gerrard staying at Liverpool were big things.
Did you ever have any dealings with Mike Ashley? Did you ever come across Mike Ashley?
No. I wouldn't know any. It's just a fact. Like from gambling, we were betting together. Like Tony found the Asian handicap, and he came to me, and I come from Brighton. I wouldn't know anyone else. I wouldn't know any other business in football. No, I wouldn't. And they are fan zone. They're both fan zone, and obviously what's happening at Newcastle and that is a different thing. But it's so hard to stay in the Premiership, but I they both do. And you know, I'm a football fan, so no, it's good times.
The phrase "gamble responsibly" is chucked about all over the place, isn't it, Harry? And it strikes me from our conversation and many we've had in the past that not enough people gamble responsibly. I mean, to you, is that a bit of a sort of a fatuous statement, or can it be done to gamble responsibly?
Neil, I mean, we've talked about it a lot, and when we did interviews when the book came out, I mean, I'm working with a tote now because they're backed my idea at Lifford, and I'd love the chance, honestly.
That's in Ireland. That's in Ireland.
That's in Ireland. Well, yeah, but it's a UK horse tote, and they're the ones. Okay. Their CEO's got the idea to bring the margins right down, John, so the punters can really win. So it's something you can really sell to the punters, and they're going to give money back, and the money stays in the sport, and it's a good thing. And I think that they will educate. I think that part of their idea is to educate punters. And we spoke about it, like I say, when the book came out. No one knows how to bet on football, but it would be so easy to tell them. And these podcasts and other things, and you know, even reading the Racing Post, you've got people like Dan Charles and Mark Langdon. And I mean, I don't read the Post every week, but they're just real top judges. You know, when these guys say have 2.5 points win Rotherham, I mean, I got the Racing Post was in here Saturday. By chance, I saw Dan Charles was napping Rotherham at 143, and I thought, if he's napping Rotherham at 143, I'll have 300 quid on him. And things like that. There are good judges, but you've got to learn how to gamble. You've got to. It's just, and the problem is, it's not about teaching them. It's about the fact that everyone else is teaching bad habits, hackers, and it's not that everyone talks about these adverts. But you know what I mean? If I'd done an advert for the toe, I'd go on and say, look, you know, or like the low margins or whatever, it's a different thing. You actually give it, punters have got, it all comes back to the same thing. Punters have got to treat every bet like they've got to win. Like it's a, you know, it's not just don't treat it like it's a lottery ticket. If you want to just have a lottery bet, have a lottery bet, build a bet or whatever. But if you want to, I think it's education. It all comes back to education for me. And I think with podcasts, you know, I think there'll be seminars, and I think people will talk about football betting. You know, I mean, hardly anyone in England's heard of Pinnacle, and they're an Asian handicap company that everyone should have an account with if you bet football. You know, the two runners, it's all Asian handicap football. They're trendsetters, and you know, you don't see them on the telly. And it's about the young players as well. You keep talking about the young people, John. They're the people that need to be educated about football betting. You're not going to change the habits of 50, 60-year-old punters who've done things all their lives. For the young people to be told, build a bet and next goal scorer is bloody wrong. And that's where the problem lies.
But apart from you today, Harry, I've not heard anybody say any of this.
No, well, no one does.
This is very informative and absolutely brilliant. But there's not enough of people like you to actually get the message out there.
No, I mean,
football could use somebody like you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I said to Neil, we talked about, you know, I'd love, you know, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I spoke at a couple of things about it, and, you know, it really, it's so easy to find out. It is, I know it's hard, but it's so easy to find out if gambling's for you or not anyway, if you've got an aptitude for it or not. It's like a lot of things in life. You've either got an aptitude for it or you haven't. And if you do certain things and play certain ways, it's not too hard to find out. But if you're always searching for a knacker or always or throwing away fivers and tenors on, if you're happy doing that, then that's fair enough. But if you're serious about your punting and want to, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to, if you've got surplus 150 quid a week and you're betting in tenors, it's a big bet. I take it if a taxi driver asks me for a tip, I'll never give him a tip unless I'm having a decent bet myself. And if they just having a tenner or a fiver or whatever on, I'll think about it later in the day. I'll think, I hope that taxi, you know, I'm glad that one for the taxi driver. That's the way. You know, I'm a funker. My book was about funkers and begrudges, and I'm a funker, and I like people to win, and I'd like people to get value. And if I could find a way of telling people how to bet on football, because one thing I know about is betting on football.
If betting firms were removed from the front of, you know, Premier League shirts or whatever shirts you like, do you think that would affect anything? Do you think that would stop people gambling, or do you think it would be a worthless exercise?
I'm not sure it'd have a massive effect. I mean, I don't, obviously if they're paying good prices to be on there, it has a big effect. You see the adverts. I mean, I don't know. I think that, like I say, I think people are going to find gambling anyway. I think the bigger issue is letting them give them advice what to do when they do find betting and when they are betting. These interviews, whenever you hear gamblers talking, they always talk about how independent and on your own and tough it is on your own. And I just think that gambling, if you're new to gambling, working in a team, working together and doing the maths and trying to make a profit is the way to go. And I think mentally as well, you're better off being in a team. And say 4 or 5 of you to work together on, like I say, college football. And out of the 4 or 5 of you, all fancy the same team. Minnesota or whatever, -6.5. And if it gets beat, it don't hurt so much because we got that wrong or whatever. And if it wins, it's more fun. And I think that's in a way what to a bigger extent, that is what Matthew Benham and Tony Bloom have done with their companies initially. They have loads of people putting the input in, and everyone's on the same thing. Every single person in the company is on the same football team that night for a small stake. And I think I love gambling, not because of the money, because I love gambling, and I think you have to enjoy your gambling. If you're not enjoying it, don't do it. I think education is the big thing you're looking at, really.
Because football gambling does appear, reading all the reports, etc. And again, this week there's going to be independent regulator probably announced. It does appear that gambling is under attack, in football. That it's a dirty word, if you like.
Yeah, it is, and that's why, on a false glories, I'm glad that I can at least show that the other side of gambling, which is lower margin and which is not bookmaking, and there is another side to it. But I do think that, like Neil wouldn't be a lot of difference, say, between, because Benham and Tony Bloom are associated with betting in the same pool as, say, like Neil said earlier, Stoke City and thing. But it's not like that. There are bookmakers and there are other ways to bet on football and trade on football. And I think that's the big difference. But I think
what's quite fascinating to me, Harry, is that you look at the clubs in the Premier League, and no Man United fan likes the Glazers. You find a few Liverpool punters don't like John Henry. Yeah. I mean, Newcastle are currently in the honeymoon period, but I suspect the love of Saudi Arabia might fade quite quickly if certain things happen. Yet no Brighton fan condemns Bloom because he's a punter. No Brentford fan condemns Benham because he's a punter. There's an acceptance of that particular person, whereas, let's say, the others are all
absolutely right. Absolutely right. I remember when Denman won the Gold Cup, he said, "Yeah, Greg Wood, he's a great journalist. Greg Wood, principles, top man. He'll be writing a bit about Liverpool Dog soon." When Denman won the Gold Cup, he said, "Yeah," he said, "You may have won the Gold Cup, or it was the Sun Alliance." He said, "But my football team's been taken over by a poker player." And I said, "What?" He said, "My football team's been taken over by a poker player." I said, "He's not a poker player." I said, "He plays poker for fun in his pastime. When he does, he wins." I said, "No." I said, "See what happens anyway." But like I said earlier about putting your hand up when you're wrong. Next time I saw Greg Wood on the train about 4 years later. He put his arm up on the train. He said, "Yeah, you're right about Tony Bloom." And Greg would have been a prime example, Neil, wouldn't it? He would have been, you talk about the problem with bookmakers, you know what I mean? If Bet 365 had owned Brighton, he would have had Greg Wood wouldn't have liked that. And he's certainly got no problem, and nor will anyone have any problems. And it's great for football, and I just wish like they were a bit more like me and told people how to do it. But I know how they've done it, and I'll tell people anyway. But it is about working together, and what 5 people's opinions better than one. Play to low margins, and don't try and bet 6 winners. Try and bet 1 winner. That's just what you've got to try and do. Basic advice.
And do you and Tony and Matthew still converse about anything or anything?
No, I haven't spoken to Tony since you spoke to Tony for a week when we done the book, for a few times when we done the book to check everything was in place, and I haven't bumped into him since. No, and I've bet him I have spoken to because the guy at the CEO at the Tote was asking, was interested in Matthew and what he does with the how he operates. A lot of people have been very intrigued by the recent purchases, I think, of Brentford. Selling them for about 5 times more than that. So no, it's amazing.
And how are you going yourself? How's things?
Well, just like I say, it's for me to get a chance to it's the last big chance for Greyhound Racing, and I do believe what we spoke about with the low margin betting and giving punters a chance. I think the combination of the Tote being there, and we just got to get ordinary punters and people understanding that and playing. And Lifford's the best track in Britain now, without a question. And with the sands down, we're going to start racing in March, and we'll have all the football on, and it'll be part of the community. The main stand there cost 16 million. It was only built in 2014, so all the infrastructure's already there. And as I say, with the Tote as partners, it's going to be a 10% takeout instead of 25 everywhere else, and it's going to give the punters a real chance. Maybe we'll hold seminars on football punting, because given the chance. I mean, if you said to me, there's a room, I told Neil, then you could put 2,000 young football punters in a room and give them 3 hours on me. They can all ask me any question they want, and
I think it'd be brilliant.
Absolutely.
There's still the best advice is in that thing, 11 men against 10. When them commentators say to you about 11 against 10, oh, it's so much harder to break down 10 men. It's so much harder to forget about all that. When you lose a player, you're in big trouble on the math. And every football match you ever see, as soon as the markets reform after a sending off, the money will only go one way. Smash on the 11 men. And that was a lesson, because I play a lot of football you see now, John, is played in running. It's played during the match, not opposed to, even when I was 10 years ago, 98% of my business would have been before the match, whereas now I'd say 98% of it's during the match, because I haven't got the time to get all the team news, and someone who's got big syndicates will know more than me. So if I start putting money up before the matches, I might get caught out, but I'd rather watch the match myself and play in running. But there's so many more goals nowadays than there used to be, and all the rules are changing. So important they changed that penalty, that handball rule this year. That was farcical the year before, farcical. But this weekend there was 2 terrible VAR penalties in Europe, 2 big goals that VAR looked at, and terrible, blatant wrong decisions made by VAR that just defy belief when you think that's what they're getting paid to do.
And how tough is that? And how tough is that for you, Harry?
Sometimes it goes in your favour, like the managers, like the players. Sometimes it goes in your favour. Sometimes it goes against you. And when it goes against you, it feels a lot worse. That's why when you're a punter, you buy a ticket. It's a great thing about being a punter. Why I love anti-post betting. Like if you become a fan. If you at the start of the season you fancy the Kansas City Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, and you have £200 at 15-2. And they win a few games and they go 4-1, and you watch them every Sunday night, you're on the firm. And that's why I've always loved the football. That's why people like football anti-post bets, bet 2 teams to win a league or whatever. But if I have a big anti-post bet, like Max, I've been a Max fan. I've watched every single thing with Max this year. I bailed out of not in any trouble because I backed him at a decent price at the start. I'll make a small profit either way, but only buttons. But I've been with Max all year, and that's been, as a fan, what have I loved this year? It's definitely been Max, and and it is basically what your biggest anti-post bet is, and that's why I love gambling so much.
Harry, long may you reign, as it were. You're a great guy, and as I say, I don't know why football doesn't use you much more. Maybe
it will after this, but I'll get a bollocking off. I'll definitely get a bollocking off Tony Boom if I see him. But no, it's all good. So I know he doesn't like the publicity, but I think it's good for people to realise that it's about winning, and everyone's got to try and win. And all the punters, if there was a way of educating all the punters that go to football matches, and I when you go to the grounds, I remember going. I'll tell you what the worst thing I ever saw for football betting. I went and watched QPR about 12 years ago. Right, the worst bet in the world is first goal scorer. This is another Ladbroke story for you. This is how bad they are. First goal scorer. So they bet 235% or whatever it is, John. Right, 6-1, 7-1, 10-1, so and so. Right. So anyway, I've gone to the game and I thought I'm not having a bet. I'm not having a bet, but I'll just have a little bit on the correct score. I'll bet a 1-0, 2-0 or so. So I've looked at the betting. And do you know they had a different coupon for the football supporters with worse odds because it was in a football ground, and they thought all they're going to do is they had this little coupon with the first goal score, and it was about 165, and the correct score was like instead of 5-1, it was 4. It was just embarrassing, and I'm glad I told that story because that epitomises the correlation between football and betting. Ladbrokes at Loftus Road thought they could. Is that QPR's ground? I've gone back a long way now. But
yeah.
They thought they could get. They thought there'd be no problem cutting 5, 6, 7-1s into 4, 5, and 5 because it's football punters. They won't know the difference, and that says it all. That says it all. And all of us are trying to get people betting on the Asian handicaps and betting at 4 and 5% and keep the money going around. Simple. Well, it's not rocket science.
They've scrapped that at Newcastle. They don't have first goal scorer because nobody scores.
Nobody scores. Well, they will after you get your checkbook out, John.
Harry, that's brilliant, and really appreciate you spending your time. I hope you haven't missed a few favourites coming in the hour we've been chatting away.
There's been a few texts going, but if there's any always better, Glenn will put them on for me. And the Aussie Dogs have finished. I love the Aussie Dogs in the morning. And that's what I'm hoping to do with our dogs. Get them in Australia. Get the Irish Greyhound Derby in Australia. Get the Irish Greyhound Derby in American poker rooms on a Saturday afternoon because all their tracks are closed. This is going to be a revolution, Neil. No margins, and we'll do seminars and tell people how to bet on football.
Brilliant.
And we'll get Tony Bloom and Matthew Benham to make a special speech and tell them how to do it.
First time anyone heard them speak.
Yeah, no one's heard Tony Bloom speak.
Anyway, thanks for your time, Harry. Really enjoyed it.
Pleasure, guys.
Great stuff, Harry. Appreciate it.
We wouldn't be at all for an hour, Neil.
I should have put a bet on, shouldn't I, really?
I would have done. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, Harry. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, Harry. And that's all from this week's podcast, which was edited and produced by Sam Sethi.
Join us for more sparkling Old Spice Boys conversation next week. You can find us on www.oldspiceboys.football and at the Old Spice Boys on Twitter. See you soon.